What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to get into the 250 preview show as well as the prediction show for the Pro Motocross series before it kicks off at round number 1 at Paula. So I do have a lot to unpackage here today. There's a lot of information as well as just some of my opinions that I like to go through. So I'm going to try to move fairly quickly. My apologies if the video does end up feeling rushed, but I just want to make sure that I can get you guys all this information as quickly as possible without wasting your guys' time while keeping the video interesting. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing I want to do is just acknowledge a few of the top guys who are going to be missing the start of Pro Motocross or all of Pro Motocross. So first up, we have a couple of the Pro Circuit riders, first being Maximus Volant. Sounds like he's going to be sitting out the entire series, so I was really hoping to have him back. He basically went out at the beginning of Supercross, so it seems like we should have had him back by now. He was really ripping out there, and he looked good for the couple races that we did get to see him, so I was looking forward to seeing him back on that Kawasaki to see what he could do. However, it does sound like now we're not going to get a chance to see him back on the Kawasaki ever again unless he does end up making a start in Pro Motocross, as it sounds like he's headed to Team Triumph next season. The next rider is going to be Austin Forkner, who is also on that Monster Energy Pro Circuit team. Sounds like he could potentially return at some point for Pro Motocross. I look to him to return maybe at the midpoint to the end point of the season just to get the ball rolling and get some gate drops before the SMX series starts. There was some talk that he could potentially return for the end of Supercross, but that obviously did not happen, and now it sounds like he's dealing with a few complications with his injury, and therefore he will be sitting out the start of Pro Motocross. Motocross was never been his forte. He's been good at it, but not great like he is in Supercross, so I think he's probably going to try to return hard for the Super Motocross series. The next rider I would like to acknowledge is Styles Robertson. If you guys didn't already know, Styles Robertson is riding for the Star Yamaha Racing Team, and he's been out the entire season with a complicated arm and wrist injury. It sounds like he's still dealing with complications with that, and I don't look to him to be returning anytime soon either. And it sounds like he's probably not going to be with that team next season, and I would speculate that he could also go to the Team Triumph, where he does have some history with Scuba from the Husqvarna days. The next rider I would like to acknowledge after him is Guillaume Ferez. So we've seen Guillaume for a couple of half seasons now. He came at the end of 2022, and then he raced the start of 2023. And we've seen the speed that he does have. He was able to get a ride with Husqvarna, and he started in the Supercross series fairly strong considering his lack of experience, but unfortunately he ended up breaking his femur, and he has not been able to return since. Now, it does sound like Guillaume is going to make a push to try to return at some point in Pro Motocross, but he will not be there for the season opener. One last rider I would like to acknowledge is going to be Jeremy Martin. Now, I think we should just have a quick moment of silence for Jeremy Martin. This could potentially be retirement for him. It feels like retirement to me. He went out with that concussion in Supercross, and yes, he did technically return for a couple of races, but realistically, he has not returned since, and it just feels like he's over it. He does not want to get hurt anymore. He is not going to be returning for Pro Motocross, and while he does have a contract with Club MX for next season, I don't think he'll be fulfilling that contract. However, that is just my speculation, and I have nothing to back that up other than just what I'm seeing out of Jeremy Martin. All right, moving on to championship contenders. We got a lot to break down here in the 250 class. There is a lot of guys that you could make an argument that they are either the championship favorite or, if not, that they're at least a contender. So we're going to start them off at what I feel like is the top, which is going to be Tom Vialle. So looking back at last season, Tom did only win one moto. However, he did win the overall at Southwick with that moto win. And while Tom did have his struggles off and on throughout the motocross season, he still finished in 6th in the points, which is nothing to be super impressed with, but you have to consider that he was riding all of these tracks for the first time, and he was basically getting a couple of short practice sessions, and he was just starting to learn the track when the race would start. So now he has settings. He's still on the same frame as he was last year. He did not change like the rest of the team. So while the rest of the KTM and Husqvarna and all those guys switched teams to the factory edition, I believe is what it's called, he's still on the same chassis. He did not make the change. So he does have that data to work with. And he also already rode most of the tracks last year. So he can work off of that. He kind of knows what lines he might want to hit, how the tracks may develop, and he's more confident as he just came off of a fresh Supercross championship. So I think that we cannot overlook the potential of Tom Vial. In my opinion, he is probably the favorite. However, the rest of these guys are really close, so it's really hard to pick a true favorite. But if I'm going to put money on someone, I'd pick Tom. Moving on to the rider who I think has the next best chance at winning the title, Hayden Deegan. Now, if we look back at Hayden's season last year, he did have 3 Moto wins, going 1-1 in Washougal with a true breakout performance, and he ended up 4th in the points overall. Now, that was with a mechanical DNF in one of the motos, so technically he might have been able to contest for 3rd. But with that being said, I think Hayden could step it up. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent, and it's going to be a little bit easier to be more consistent this year now that Hunter Lawrence and Justin Cooper are no longer in the class, as they were the 1st and 2nd place finishers in the point season last year. So with that being said, I do think that Hayden has a really good shot at the title. I would not be surprised one bit if he ends up taking it, and that is why he is my second choice for the title favorites. Next up, and I know this one's probably going to be a little controversial, I have RJ Hampshire as my 3rd favorite pick for the championship title. Now, remember guys, I'm not necessarily picking these guys as finishing 1, 2, 3. I'm picking them as the most likely for the championship title. I do see them all as title threats. So with RJ, I see him as someone who could definitely go after this title. We know he has the speed. Last season, he ended up winning 2 motos, and he did end up 8th in the points, which at first glance does not sound that impressive. Sounds like he probably made some mistakes, but if you look at his season statistics, he did not score any points in the last 5 motos, as he ended up not finishing the season. So realistically, I do think if RJ can stay healthy and just get reasonably good starts all season long, he'll be pretty hard to beat come championship time. I have 2 more guys that I want to cover as title threats, and the next one is going to be Joe Shimoda. So Joe, I feel like, is probably some people's favorite for the title, and I do think you could make a good argument for that. Last season, he ended up going 3rd in the points, so if you take away the 1st and 2nd riders, he is the next logical choice as the most likely person to go after that championship. He ended up winning 3 motos, and he did go 1-1 at the end of the season in Ironman. So technically, if you look at where he left off in motocross, he's in an absolutely great spot to, just go out there and kill it. So I do think there's a good argument for Joe to be the title favorite. My only concern is that he is kind of banged up from the end of Supercross, and he's also on a completely different bike and setup than he was at the end of last season. We did see those pro circuit bikes starting to come around at the end of motocross last season. We know they had a great engine package. They were starting to get hole shots and great starts, which was one of the things that Joe was struggling with. So once that came around, it seemed like his results also came around. Now, I do know that the Honda team did have Trey Kennard step down to the 250, and he was actually at Paula working on an engine package, specifically the fuel injectors and things like that, to try to get that motor running even better. I'm assuming they're trying to get that Honda off the line to keep up with the Kawasaki's and the Star Yamahas. So that was pretty interesting. It sounds like they had some good results, and they were working with Joe and Chance Hymas to try to improve the bike. So that's really great to see. I love seeing Trey out there. But right now, I'm just trying to make a point with Joe, and that is that he might be able to do good, but he's known for having a slow start to the season, and I think he's setting himself up for a great chance at having a slow start to the season, coming in banged up and still testing the bike. But I would not be shocked at all if he ended up winning Paula and came out with the red plate. However, I don't think that is the most likely scenario. The last guy I want to talk about as a true championship contender is going to be Levi Kitchen. So we just saw Levi have an absolutely breakout Supercross season. Last season in motocross, he won 2 motos and he ended up 5th in the points. So he really wasn't that far off to begin with. And now he looks to be an even better racer. He's more confident. He's getting great starts. And he seems to be gelling with that Kawasaki quite well. So I do think Levi is a championship contender. However, I would pick all these other 4 guys over him, but I'm definitely not counting him out. So I'll have to keep an eye on Levi. I think he's going to be really solid, kind of Ryan Dungey-esque. So I do look to him to just be right there in the top 5, maybe not blowing the doors off of anyone at most of the races, but it could come to round 5 when these guys are starting to make mistakes and have bad motos. It's like, hey, Levi hasn't been outside the top 5 all season. He's only 3 points back. And next thing you know, he's a title threat. So that's my prediction with Levi. We'll have to keep an eye on how that develops. But I do think he is also a title contender. Now, moving on to the spoilers, or aka everyone else, there's a lot of guys that I'd like to go through. So we're going to try to do this pretty quickly. The first rider I want to talk about is Jordan Smith. So Jordan, we know he's going to Triumph next season. So I don't look to him to try to make any friends with Star Yamaha. It's going to be interesting to see how serious he takes it. Some people are saying that he's just going to mail it in. I personally think that he's going to give it everything he has. I feel like this was kind of a breakout season for him in Supercross. He almost won a Supercross title back in 2017, and I do think he still thinks of himself as someone who can win championships, and I still think he is coming into the season with the thought that he could be a title threat. So I'm not counting him out just yet. I'm curious to see how he can do at the end of the motos. I feel like that's where he's either going to win or lose. His shot at the title is going to be with his endurance. So keep an eye on Jordan Smith, and also keep an eye on Jordan Smith if he ever gets next to Hayden Deegan. Moving on to Joey Savacci. Now, this is someone that I think we really need to pay attention to, and I think he's being extremely overlooked. I don't want to overhype him, but I do think I would be doing him a misservice if I did not draw attention to his accomplishments and his situation. So Joey, if you didn't know, by my count, has around 8 overall 250 victories in pro motocross from before, back when he was consistently racing the 250s. Now he's been training for motocross all season long because he's been on the Triumph team and they're not allowed to race him in the 250 class due to the point out rule. Even though he never won a championship, he pointed out, so therefore he could not go out there and race the 250 in the Supercross class. So from the gate, he's been out there testing for motocross, training for motocross with a mindset of, I'm going to go race motocross. And that's all he's been thinking about. He's been at the motocross pace all season long. He doesn't have to find that top end speed. He doesn't need to test the bike. He's already done all of that. I'm sure that he's done exhaustive testing and I'm sure he's ready. So with Joey, if he can come out swinging, he might be able to establish himself early as a contender as these other guys are still trying to find their feet, coming down off of their Supercross championship highs, and just maybe trying to find that top end speed that you don't really have in pro motocross. I think that Triumph motor looks great. The bike looks great. And if he can get off the start, he is going to be seriously dangerous. And I would not be overly shocked if he ends up getting the red plate at some point this season. The next rider we got to talk about is going to be Michael Moseman. So Michael is coming back for motocross with Star Yamaha Racing. We saw him briefly in Supercross, but he ended up going out with an injury. He's coming back for the season opener, and I looked at him to be fairly strong. I don't really consider him a title threat, but he's going to be someone who could get in the way, who could contend for a moto win, and just someone to be considered that could be up at the front. So keep an eye out for Michael Moseman. Let's see how he can do. Moving on to Cameron McAdoo. McAdoo is back. He's riding. He was banged up, and he had to call it quits when he did have the red plate. Really hate to see him go out like that at the end of Supercross, but he's back on the bike. I personally saw him riding at Glen Helen. He looks strong. He looks ready. I'm sure he's still banged up, and I don't look for him to have the full endurance that he's going to need at the end of the second moto. But if Cameron can get a start, I look to him to have the pace to at least hold those top guys off who are coming on strong and really shake up the points and just make things interesting. Moving on to Nate Thrasher. He's kind of a giant question mark. I'm not really sure where to put him, if he should be in the top 5 or in 15th. I'm really not sure what to expect from him. If he won a moto, I would be like, okay, sure. And if he got 15th, I would be like, yeah, that sounds about right. So he's in there, not really sure where to put him, but he's going to be in there. Pierce Brown, another guy that's kind of like Nate Thrasher, but a little bit more consistent, but still kind of crashes a lot. We're not really sure exactly what to expect out of him. Now, Pierce did race that Glen Helen Stopwatch Nationals, and he did end up winning the first moto, even with Brock Tickle out there on a 450 pushing it behind him. But in the second moto, while he was trying to come up through the field, he did end up going down. He seemed a little bit banged up. He was not quick to get up, but he did end up walking off the track. Now, that was Thursday, basically a little bit more than a week before the start of the Pro Motocross Series. So I do look to him to probably be okay to start, but I'm sure he's probably a little bit sore and he's probably not going to get the amount of riding that he would have liked to before the start of Pro Motocross. So I don't look to him to be a serious threat, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him up at the front at some point this season. Moving on to his teammate Ryder DeFrancisco. Ryder looked really good. He looked comfortable on the bike and he looked smooth. He looked fast, but he was also at that Glen Helen Stopwatch Nationals, and one thing I did notice is that he seemed to tense up at the end of the race and really fall back. So I looked to him to fade pretty bad at the end of the motos, especially at the start of the season. Hopefully he can race his way into shape, but I do not look to him to be able to push his way forward as the moto is winding down. If anything, he's probably going to drop back. So hopefully he can get some good starts and just hold his pace as best as possible. I hope that he can have some good results, but I look to him to be right there just outside the top 10. Moving on to Julian Beaumer, another rider that was at the Glen Helen Stopwatch Nationals, and he, I guess you could say, was kind of the opposite to me. He did also look very comfortable and smooth on the bike, but he was actually able to push it more than anyone else that I saw, at least to the eye test. At the end of the moto, he was still laying the bike over sideways off of the lifts, scrubbing, getting the back wheel down on the ground, and pushing forward. He caught Ryder DeFrancisco and passed him like it was nothing. So really cool to see. Hopefully he can build some confidence. I know that he got pretty shook up after those 2 wet rounds of Supercross right after his good performance in Anaheim, and that was kind of hard for him to bounce back. And then he also ended up getting hurt before Glendale. So it sounds like he's got some momentum. He looks solid. I wouldn't be surprised to see him anywhere around the top 5, but I do expect him to be more around that 10th place mark. Moving on to Seth Hamaker. I'm not really sure what to do with Seth. Kind of like Nate Thrasher, but I'm sure he's going to be in there. Another great rider we got to keep an eye on. Jalek Swoll, it feels like he could potentially win a moto, but realistically, I look for him to probably be around 7th to 10th. Hard to say exactly, but it's going to be cool to see him working with Joey Savacci, his teammate on the Triumph. Hopefully they can do pretty well. I would like to see another bike brand get established in our sport, and I feel like Jalek is going to help them do that. Another rider we got to talk about is Cody Schock. So Cody is having an absolutely great season. We all saw what he did in Supercross. I'm becoming a big fan of Cody Schock personally, and from what I'm hearing, he's a little bit better of an outdoor rider than a Supercross rider. So based off of his Supercross results, he never quite had the, blow your doors off speed, but he was very consistent, relatively mistake-free, except for that time where we saw him go flying over the berm and into that wall. But other than that, his success this season was mostly dictated by him just being an opportunist and not making mistakes when other riders did. So I look to him to apply that to motocross and potentially try to move up the SMX standings. He's right there in 7th. He's not that far back from the guys in front of him. So I think he's trying to build towards a solid super motocross finale. But look for Cody. The one thing I am concerned with him is that potentially that Club MX motor package is not going to be able to compete with those factory bikes off of the longer start straights that we might have in motocross compared to, say, the Supercross schedule. So we'll have to see how that fares. Hopefully he can get good starts. He seems to be a good starter, so hopefully he can get out in front and just show these guys what's up. Moving on to Chance Hymas, we know he has the speed. We've seen him be up front, but I'm concerned about his ACL. He has a torn ACL. He's racing with the torn ACL. He's been racing with the torn ACL pretty much all season. I'm concerned. I don't know why it's not being talked about more. People are saying, oh, he could be a top 5 guy, this, that. But realistically, I don't know why he's even out there. I think he needs to get it repaired. He's still young, and I feel like he's wasting his time going out there with a bum knee, just waiting to blow up, and then he's going to end up having to have surgery then. I know it's frustrating because he just came back from another torn ACL, but I know it's tempting to just try to get out there and get some results, but I'm really concerned that he's just going to go out there, dab his knee one time, and that's going to be it for his season, and it's going to be even more frustrating. But I wish Chance all the best. I think he could get in there, but I just don't see how he's going to really push it to that extra 1% he's going to need to be up towards the front where he belongs with a torn ACL. I know it's been done, but that's usually when guys are fighting for titles and finishing out the season. This is just him trying to go out there and ride because he hasn't been able to ride, so he's just trying to get track time, and I don't think that building experience with a torn ACL is really ideal, but then again, I'm just some guy on YouTube, so who knows? But Chance, good luck out there. Hope your ACL holds up. Still a few more guys I want to talk about. The next one being Daxton Bennick. So it feels like he could possibly get in there. I'm not really sure what to expect out of him. We'll have to keep an eye on him. Hopefully he can just stay smooth, be consistent, and build experience. Same thing could be said for Casey Cochran, who is going to be the lone Husqvarna rider in the 250 class, at least at the start of the season. He's been testing. He looks solid. I don't look for him to have the top end speed, but I think he's just going to try to build this season and just be in the top 15, try to get the laps in, try to get some results, but hopefully we don't see like a Talon Hawkins 2.0 where he just gets dumped off the team and has to go to satellite teams and figure it out. One last rider I would like to mention is going to be Jet Reynolds. So Jet is going to be riding with Club MX. He was supposed to come and debut with them in East Coast Supercross, but he ended up hurting himself in press day in Detroit. so he never got to make that debut. Sounds like he's back riding and riding good, so hopefully he can finally turn his career around and get things going. So in summary, to me, there's 5 clear-cut championship contenders, and it kind of feels like Joey Savatgy could maybe be a championship contender. He's going to have to get off to a really good start to the season. I don't see him coming back mid-season and just fighting back to get better results and catch up to these guys. He should theoretically be more prepared than anyone else, so if he does not get off to a great start, I don't see him being that, but I'm trying to say don't count him out just yet. Also, there should be a lot more Moto winners this season, as last season Hunter Lawrence and Justin Cooper ended up taking home a lot of the Moto wins. There were some other guys who got in there, but my point is that the 2 title favorites and the first and second in the points from last season are now gone. It feels like there will be a little bit less domination this season and a little bit more parity, and I think that it'll be a lot easier to either gain or lose a lot of points, as there will be a lot of guys, even in the mid-pack area, that will help keep the top guys from getting back up there and earning a lot of points. If they, say, fall over in the first turn or make a big mistake, they're not going to be able to just fly through the field like in years past, or at least that's my theory. And if that's the case, I think you could see the championship points lead changing quite a bit. We did have 7 different red plate holders in Supercross, which was obviously subdivided into 2 different divisions, so it's not quite the same thing. However, my point is that there was a lot of parity in Supercross. I think we'll see a lot more parity in Motocross. One last thing I want to mention is that Tom Vialle is actually 5th in Super Motocross points. So even though he did win the title, he's actually 5th in the overall standings, and the guys that got 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the West Coast division are actually ahead of him. So if Tom is as good as I say he's going to be, keep an eye on that gap and see if you can try to close in on RJ, who's actually 36 points ahead of him right now, which is basically like a moto and a half. Also, as I have mentioned in some of my other videos, I'm going to be going out to the Pala National myself and trying to get you guys some first-hand footage, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Lastly, if you guys enjoyed this video, I will be making a 450 version of this video, so stay tuned for that. But with that being said, that is going to go ahead and do it for this video. If you guys made it this far, really appreciate you guys sticking around. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. It really helps me out. If you already have subscribed, I really appreciate you guys. And with all of that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.